Chris, you told us you have an interesting theory about people's fear of creativity.
Yeah.
And doctoring up shots and adding all sorts of expensive equipment because you think that maybe they're afraid of their own lack of creativity or imagination.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
My greatest insecurity as a filmmaker is my own talent. Creativity calls for talent. It calls for a lot of work. You know, there's like that, it's 10% talent, 90% sweat or something. That's definitely true. But creativity, making a really good film, let alone a great film, calls for talent, creativity, originality. That to me is the most difficult aspect and the most important aspect of filmmaking. And because it is the most challenging and most difficult, I believe a lot of filmmakers at the beginning stages, I'm not necessarily talking about, really well-established legends, but folks in my realm, I believe that the temptation is, probably on a deep, subconscious, whatever level, the temptation is to run from the creativity and write in expensive, flashy, entertaining, cool, witty, whatever elements into the film. And producing, or trying to produce, flashy, wow factor type stuff, such as an A-lister or whatever, having a marginal star in your movie. Because that ultimately, I think on the subconscious level, people are trying to distract the viewer from the core, which is creativity, which is originality, which is good content. It's kind of like a person who's just all beautiful, flashy on the outside, but inside there's just a void. They're ugly and empty on the inside, So I think that's a great mistake. First and foremost, audiences know better, unless it's just a spectacular film on a production level and people don't even care about the trite story. They're clearly not going for the story. They're going for the explosions and stuff, but no one in my realm can do that yet. So I think that's a tremendous mistake, and I think a lot of filmmakers need to take a personal inventory and be honest with themselves and say, why am I writing all these stunts in my film? Why am I writing all this stuff that I probably don't even have access to? Rather, why don't I focus on the craft? Why don't I focus on the creativity? Why don't I challenge myself? Can I make a good film? Not necessarily great, doesn't have to be great, but can I make a good film, again, going back to my example, in my mom's basement? Can I make a good film in, one or two locations that I have access to? That's the challenge. And this is the thing I say time and time again with friends when we're arguing, debating, fighting. The absolute most important thing in filmmaking as a writer-director, the absolute most important thing is craft, or you could call it directorial execution, and that costs nothing. You can demonstrate craft, directorial execution with an iPhone camera in one shot. One shot on your iPhone, a one-shot film, 1 minute, post it on YouTube, it didn't cost you anything. You could demonstrate that. It costs you nothing.
Right, but in that one shot with that iPhone, with two actors in your mom's basement on a couch, how do you make it compelling? How do you make it interesting so that people want to stay through that whole minute? What are you doing?
That's the art. That's the art. And that's your burden as a filmmaker. That's your burden. And that's what you need to demonstrate, that you can do that. And that's what's going to separate you from the rest.
So where do you learn to make those little nondescript moments compelling so that you're not relying on CGI, which
exactly
most people can't afford,
yeah.
and all the crane shots and things like that? Where is someone going for that knowledge?
Well, there's definitely something to be said about gaining knowledge, being educated. So there's definitely a role in going to Q&As, listening to commentaries on like Criterion or whatever. Reading books. There's amazing books, like, again, Mark Stolarov's No Budget School. You know, like, just being in LA, I have to say that's one of the upsides of being in LA. There's just stuff going on all over the place. There's something to say about that. But ultimately, where do you learn? Where do you gather that talent, that skill set? By doing it. That's the only way. And that's why I did 7 films in 7 weeks last summer, because I had just finished my feature film. It was in post-production. I'm like sitting around doing nothing. I'm like, how is this filmmaking? Watching people color correct my film. Nah, I like that tint better. It's not filmmaking. So I said, what can I do? I envy the painter who just puts up the canvas, and, you know, or the poet, you know. I envy that. They sketch, you know. All great artists, all great painters, you see their sketches. You could buy a book of just their sketches, you know. Like Van Gogh and Monet and all them, they just did haystacks, you know. How can I do that as a filmmaker? So I came up with the idea of I'm gonna make 1 short film a week for 7 consecutive weeks. And I did it, and I learned a lot. Are they great? I don't know. I didn't even submit them to film festivals. I don't care, because they were sketches. So I like to think I'm a better filmmaker now after doing that. And I might actually do it again this fall.
So by doing those 7 films in 7 weeks, you learned when a look translated kind of spoke 1,000 words, and these very subtle things that you didn't need a lot of resources to be able to have people emotionally invested. I mean, what did you see once you walked away from those 7 films that you realized that I don't need all these, you know,
well,
big shiny Hollywood things?
Yeah, I mean, I was already convinced of that going into it, but making in terms of what we're talking about with the 7 films, you know, I'm just going to be really honest. I don't think any one of my films is really exceptional. I don't. Quite frankly, it has a lot to do with making it in a week. You know? I don't think a lot of filmmakers, even the great masters, would be able to make an exceptional film in a week. But, and this is very important, I'd say in almost all of them, if not all, objectively speaking, there is at least one thing that really worked well. Like in my 5th film, there's a little monologue that one of the characters says that I just think I nailed it as a writer. So my point is, making those 7 films really affirmed to me, first and foremost, that, hey, maybe I do have a little bit of talent. And secondly, you know, just an actor standing in a kitchen, you could have, granted she's a good actor, okay? But you can have something really cool happen. You know, it didn't need to be Halle Berry. Didn't need to be, you know, in a location that costs $10,000 a day. I didn't have a multi-million-dollar crew, whatever. But it's pretty darn good. And a lot of people still talk about that monologue.